We are a cloud services provider. We've been around since 2012. We originally started as a managed service provider and quickly transitioned to entirely wholesale. Most of our services were the requests that we were getting from people were from other IT companies, other managed service providers that didn't want to sort of run or build their own cloud solutions. We were doing a lot of end user computing with another provider who shall not be named, and we moved over to VMware. And we were the first in Australia to launch the Horizon DaaS platform. And we've been running the Horizon DaaS platform since before VMware acquired Destone. So for those of you that don't know, Destone was the company that originally built the Horizon DaaS platform. And yeah, so we sort of know it like the back of our hand. We're Australian owned and operated. We have a national network, however, deliver production services for DaaS and things like that out of Sydney and Melbourne. As we're basically a technical team. So pretty much our entire team is level 3 and above. As we're a wholesale provider, we work with managed service providers. We let you guys own the end customer relationship. We let you do all the level 1, level 2 support. And yeah, we have a range of services. We started off as desktop as a service. So that was our very first offering that we did with that other provider that shall not be named. And based on sort of partner feedback over the years, we've obviously introduced, the surrounding product portfolio. So infrastructure as a service obviously ties very well in. That's running on the big cloud platform. Backup and DR, we use primarily Veeam for that. Wholesale voice, internet, security as a service. Now, all of these products are really geared, and I won't really talk about them today at all, apart from this. They're really geared around the desktop as a service, so the end-to-end piece of it. What is important about us, and I'll sort of highlight it a couple of times throughout the slides, but we understand that partners, a lot of our partners have got their own vCloud stack. Some of them are buying cloud services from other providers. We are very agile and very flexible. The services like vCloud that we offer are really there for the partners that don't want to offer those services, but they need somewhere to run the infrastructure and they want it to be all under, one location. So our primary bread and butter is the desktop as a service offering, and everything else is really the surrounding value add. So I guess quickly, why partnering with hosted network? And I want to sort of primarily focus on the DaaS piece of it, but we, as I said, are a technical team. So it lets you focus on your end customers and what you do, supporting that end customer. We worry about the infrastructure, and even the architecture and whatnot of each solution. So first of all, really flexibility, right? So when a partner comes to us, they typically engage us right at the beginning of an opportunity, and we'll work with them to design the solution for that end customer. In some cases, we'll go to the meetings with the partner. Sometimes there's an aggregated, approach, so the customer will know about hosted network. Other times it's under a white label approach, which is probably more the case. We're very flexible. Like I said before, we connect into pretty much everyone. We've got partners that have got their own stacks. We've got partners that want to run their own storage, but don't want to run their own DaaS platform, for example. So we will accommodate pretty much any configuration. And I guess very importantly, as I said before, you own that customer relationship. So we bill you, you bill the end customer. So cost savings. So again, you don't have to worry about for DaaS, for example, you don't have to worry about having end user computing specialists. You just really need to have staff that can support those, Windows workloads and the applications that are running within it. We worry about the infrastructure underneath, making sure that, the availability is there, and, taking care of all those infrastructure costs so that you get a very predictable price that you don't have to, worry about the fluctuations unless you're increasing or decreasing resources. All of our, I guess, the services that we productize, they're positioned towards managed service providers. We've steered away from a utility billing approach so that rather than the hourly billing approach that a lot of cloud providers have, ours is very predictable, right? So even with things like, say, if you're choosing to use our WAN, so if you've got one of our DaaS desktops and you've got our internet, we just include unlimited internet for a fixed price because it's simple, right? That way you don't have to go to other providers that offer DaaS and then you get, you've had however many hours of DaaS and however many hours of internet bandwidth. Obviously, fair use sort of applies with that. But coming back to flexibility, if you want to use your own WAN, you can. So the partners out there that have their own IP transit, that can run their own BGP, all of those, we're happy to integrate in that sense. We also offer free trials and proof of concepts. So DaaS is very much about, I guess, proving to the end customer that the solution is going to work. It's going to meet their requirements. So we will work with you through the opportunity lifecycle to really develop the proof of concept to meet their actual specifications. And unlike a lot of providers, as we are working with managed service providers, we typically can accommodate delayed billing for a certain period of time as well. So when you're doing a DaaS migration, unlike a lot of cloud providers that as soon as you turn it on, you get billed, we can delay billing to accommodate that migration period and things like that. So we're flexible. At the end of the day, we're about working together to build a strong relationship that is going to meet the outcomes for our customers or our mutual customers. And I guess pre and post sale support. So because we are a technical team, a lot of our partners will solely use us for solutions architect. Some of our bigger partners will just use us for another set of eyes. So larger opportunities, we might be doing a workshop around the solutions architecture piece, helping with the tender, things like that. Other times it's, simply they give us the bill of materials that they need and we quote it. So following the end of, once the opportunity has been won, we can then work with you from migration assistance as well. So whether that's just around general advice, or actually giving you resources to help with that migration, so professional services and whatnot. So moving on though, I guess we're here to talk about Horizon DaaS through hosted network. So as I mentioned, we were the first to market in Australia. We're the only wholesale provider of Horizon DaaS in Australia. And we've been doing it pretty much since day dot with VMware. We know it very, very, very well. Most of the other providers in Australia call us every now and then for technical support and things like that. There's not a lot of us that do it. End user computing is a bit of a beast. As a service provider and at scale, it certainly is even more of a beast. So a little bit about our offering. So we have the very latest version of Horizon DaaS 8. So the latest protocols, if you're familiar with Horizon View, you get the latest blast protocols. With Horizon 8, which Nick, we did the service provider call, what, 2 months ago? Yeah, so a lot of those features, they're available in our offering. So you get the refresh management interface, you get the new help desk console, all of those sort of bits and pieces. I won't sort of cover the exact everything that's included in the product. For existing partners that are on the call, because I know a few of them are, if you're on the version 6, we are migrating partners over to version 8 at no cost. We, as a provider, we expect that you're going to want to white label the environment, so you can white label it as you, but you can also white label it as your customer. So you can provide custom CSS sheets, custom DNS records, things like that, so that we sit behind the scenes and you're the hero at the end of the day. You own the customer, your brand, away you go. For the more powerful, what I term workstation as a service, we do have a GPU-backed offering. So if you're looking to deliver AutoCAD, things like Photoshop, things like that, we can deliver that from the cloud. Works really, really well. The best use case I have to that is we recently did a proof of concept for a private college that specializes in video game courses. So we were, we had the team delivering things like Unreal Tournament, World of Warcraft, for those of you, the gamers out there, from the cloud. And while it's not exactly as perfect as, from a local computer, it works surprisingly well. But for business use cases, it works spot on. Like I said before, unlimited WAN bandwidth. Nick,
can I interrupt you there?
You can.
So while we're on use cases and so when if a partner comes to you and you provide them with Horizon DaaS, like desktop as a service.
Yep.
What's commonly something you see as your partner wrapping around that, or do they just deliver, a customer-facing desktop, or do they wrap other professional services around it? Do they usually bundle it with other products?
Yep.
How do you see that usually work?
So the best use case that I see is when a managed service provider has a support contract, right? So they're typically doing a per device or a per user support bundle, and that might include whatever it includes. And then they're layering the service. So the desktop comes with the support package. It might come, if you think of the line items on the actual quote, that might come with X amount of storage for network storage. It might have database as a service and however many quantities of desktops, which includes support, which might also include, say, your Microsoft 365 and those sort of components. Sure. So yeah, the DaaS is it's a value add. At the end of the day, you're turning say a desktop that would be sold up front into a recurring revenue stream. So you're value adding an extra layer of that.
Yeah. Cool.
So yeah, one thing that we use is distributed storage, and this is probably one of the most technical things I'll talk about. So all SSD storage, so you get bucket loads of performance. Anyone that has dealt with end user computing knows that a customer with a slow application is an absolute nightmare to deal with. So we actually brought the company SolidFire to Australia for this, and NetApp has since bought them out for a nice 1.2 billion. Yeah, delivers ultra low disk latency. So the performance is really, really nice, keeps end users very, very happy. We have things in place like quality of service at the storage layer to avoid bootstorm IOP issues like that. So yeah, won't go into too much more. Flexible networking and connectivity. Like I said previously, and this is, I guess, one very big thing about us, and I sort of do harp on about it a little bit, but as a service provider, we're very agile. If you're running your own stack, we can integrate with it. If you are providing your own wholesale, or you've got your own wholesale arrangements with, the likes of Telstra or any other carrier, you can use those for layer 2 links. We can tie them in. If you've got your own co-location and you want to run your own storage or backup services, and you want to cross connect to us, go for it. If you're with one of the other cloud providers and you want to run us for DaaS and run, say, the Active Directory and file services from Azure or AWS, go for it. You want a VPN in for on-prem Active Directory authentication for a hybrid approach, go for it. We will work with you to architect that solution, take into consideration all of the variables, and build a solution that works for you and the end customer. Cool. So one thing that I just always like to cover is, as with any cloud provider, the technical, who's responsible for what. We basically look after the virtualization stack and below, and you look after the operating system and above. So any end user calls, anything like that, will always go to you, and you can escalate to us for performance issues or any particular networking issues or anything like that that you might be having. So very quickly on that one. So normally I was saying to Nick earlier, I do this slide and I can take up to an hour because I go into a lot of technical detail around protocols and things like that. So apart from talking about networking today, this is going to be the most technical piece that I just want to cover. When a lot of partners come to us, they're doing, particularly the small and medium-sized partners, they're trying to compare an on-premise model with a cloud model, and it's very hard to get the cost point for a customer to compare. So we have two approaches that we work for our tenant architecture. The first is what we call a full isolation approach, which is basically a traditional on-premise sort of approach. You've got a dedicated Active Directory. The tenant sits privately in their own VLAN. They've got their own firewall, router, etc. It's just all running in the cloud. Nothing really special about that. But the next piece of it is what we call a super tenant. And this is what we encourage our smaller customers, your partners that have smaller customers, so say 50 seats or below, work really well with what a super tenant. And this is where you've got shared architecture around your Active Directories, your potentially file servers, potentially databases, So, offering database as a service, utilizing DFS for, redundant file service delivery, and securing each tenant into their own VLAN with, so Active Directory and those sort of core network services running in a DMZ. Without sort of going into heaps of detail, this lowers the overall management. It lowers the price point for the customer to actually move to an entirely cloud-based approach. It lowers the licensing. You don't have to license as many Active Directory servers. You don't have to back up as many servers. You don't have to pay for as much compute to running all those other servers. So for partners that want to go down this approach, and this architecture is actually quite common, whether people term it super tenant or not. A lot of cloud providers do this with, tie in straight RDS. They might tie in, on-premise, authentication into this. So it is quite common, but, we will work with a partner to actually stand this up. We'll give you guidance around everything from group policy to the networking piece of it to actually get it stood up. Because if you are looking to onboard smaller customers, it does allow you to onboard them a lot quicker. So what do we include in our desktop as a service? So as mentioned, we include unlimited WAN when you're using us for WAN. We do hourly volume level snapshots on the SSD storage arrays. We provide 24/7 Australian-based support. We provide architecture and deployment assistance. You can run our DaaS out of Sydney or Melbourne. And we include the operating system licensing. Now, we provide Server 2012 or 2016. For those of you that have done end user licensing for VDI before, Microsoft licensing is not the most friendliest thing in the world. You can, of course, bring your own desktop licensing. As a service provider, we can't provide it to you, though. So you need to have either an enterprise agreement, virtual device access, or software assurance, or Microsoft has recently announced their Microsoft 365, which includes Windows 10 Enterprise, Microsoft Office, and things like that.
Would you say that's the best way to get Windows 10? Because I know a lot of our partners out there are looking at doing Windows 10 management as a service as part of a device and application management service.
It's not something we're seeing a lot of at the moment, but it's something that we're having a lot of conversations around. So most of our partners are obviously very familiar with Office 365, but everything that Microsoft 365 includes, because it does include the Microsoft Windows 10 Enterprise, things like identity management, security products, all of that. It is taking a little bit longer, and it's relatively new as well.
What about bringing their own Windows 10 licensing, just the OS?
Yeah, so they can, but the end user needs an enterprise agreement or with software assurance or virtual device access.
Is that something you can help with in terms of licensing?
Definitely. So it's basically, it works out under Microsoft Mobility. So it's basically a piece of paperwork, one page that the customer just needs to sign, and we send it to Microsoft to say, hey, these licenses are running under the hosted network environment. The benefit of doing that as well, though, is that our cost to our partner actually goes down when you bring your own licensing to that, because we're not accommodating for the server license. So we use Data Center Edition to actually provide the OS piece of that. So we remove that cost. So that cost goes down.
Can we hang on that point for a bit?
Yes.
The reason being is that, I've spoken to you about this before, that one of the main reasons I wanted you on this call is because I think you're doing something unique in Australia, and we have a lot of partners that want to provide value-added services and don't necessarily want to build the full infrastructure stack themselves, which is exactly where you come in by handling the infrastructure and the virtualization piece. So something like Workspace ONE came to mind when I was talking to you last time, and a lot of our partners are thinking, so I don't want to own and operate infrastructure. I still want stickiness with my end customer, and how can I achieve that? So something that we talk about a lot at VMware is Workspace ONE application management. You own the identity of the customer. So could you talk a bit about how you could integrate your desktop service? Well, I guess I don't expect you to know about how Workspace ONE operates, but I mean, in terms of how your partners can own the end customer identity and potentially bundle it with other SaaS applications. So something like if I wanted to deliver a virtual desktop and Office 365 and a Salesforce application through Workspace ONE, is that something that's achievable?
Totally. I mean, at the end of the day, they're just it's a SaaS model, I guess, for the desktop. So you can deliver that through Workspace ONE, just like you would any other application.
Sure.
And Workspace ONE, because it natively integrates with the view client and all of that, it's out of the box. There's no customization or anything needed. It is sort of out of the box. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, because that's something I wanted to touch on, just because I know a lot of our partners are worried about that customer retention and stickiness, and I know you don't particularly care because you have a channel model, so you don't want to own the customer.
We let our partners deal with the end customers.
Yeah, yelled at less.
Yeah, that's it. Dealing with IT guys is so much easier.
Yeah, I'll let you continue, but I just wanted to bring up that integration of how other VMware partners could potentially add on further up the stack. So
yeah, definitely.
Application layer. So guys on the call, that's potentially something to think about right now.
That's with the DaaS model as well. You can also do session-based applications. So you can do published apps and things like that, which can also be published through Workspace ONE. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an entire, and I've talked about specifically VDI in this presentation, but under the Horizon DaaS platform, you can do published applications and things like that.
Okay.
So if you've got traditional applications that you want to present through Workspace ONE, you can do that without needing to publish an entire desktop.
That's very cool, actually, because things like, I know legal firms, accounting firms, medical offices, they all have their
Practice Evolve, all those fun things,
specific apps. So.
Yeah, and they're good verticals for if I think of the common people that are running on this, accountants, recruitment firms, law firms, professional services are fantastic at a DaaS model. Accountants, they get it. Recruitment firms, they like to sort of tie their costs back to a per head. When you get into education is a great one as well, particularly because you can do non-persistent desktops, which sort of locks down some of the costing around that. So not provisioning desktops for the entire school, but just the students that need them or the concurrent logins. So they're all some good verticals to target.
So while we're on verticals, we talk about government. Do you have government customers, or are there any considerations there that are different from other verticals around security and things like that?
So GovDC is available. We typically only would do that with a private stack, so not our public approach. So in that case, it's sort of on a case-by-case basis. So yeah, by all means, speak to us about that. We can connect into any of the environments in GovDC and whatnot. We let our partners have to be on the cloud panel for that, so they have to be front and center, and we're really just aggregating in the back end.
Right.
So, but government is a good approach, particularly with their cloud first. Unfortunately, like we were saying before, the Australian government doesn't quite have the push that the New Zealand government has, but they do have a very cloud first approach these days. We're seeing more and more traction, particularly with local councils, all around, even regional. So, there's a lot of Adelaide councils that, South Australian councils that are really pushing for these sort of models. So we've got some partners that are doing really well down there. So yeah, government is a great target. It fits very well. So if you've got those business, that you're working in that vertical, then yeah, DaaS does tie in really, really nicely. And whereas you'd have to traditionally do, say, a view deployment, and you'd have to, scope it, you'd have to spec it, you'd have to deploy it. With this, you'd have to support the environment. With our approach, you can go to market with that. The account managers can basically just sell a SKU, and you don't have to worry anywhere near about all of that sort of technical component of it.
Yeah.
So one question on, because this is coming back to things that's hosted out of the hosted network environment, because we're dealing on the user experience side. What are you mentioned before, there's some things that you do in the back end. So things like the solid states, making sure that's all boot storms no longer a problem. What are the things that is visible to the partner that they can probably report back into the user and say, hey, this is the performance you've got, maybe we can add more services to make sure that your experience is a lot better.
Okay, so what some of the things that we approach is that's why we offer WAN services, for example. So layer 2 links, keeping the latency nice and low. You've got a lot of control like View, so all of the group policies that you would apply in View translate to Horizon DaaS. So if you're optimizing PC over IP, which is all the Blast Extreme protocols, so the 2 protocols that we recommend that you use, you can customize all of those on a per user basis, or security groups within Active Directory. So you really can sort of tailor the experience, things like frame rate, bandwidth, audio compression, pretty much everything. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and what about things like, is the virtual machine or is the virtual machine size in a cookie cutter approach? We have small, medium, large, those types of things. Is there
next slide?
Is there a way that the partner that is on selling this to the customer and say, you're on small, however, based on what we're seeing, you would benefit going to medium?
Yes.
So that type of selling capability.
That's the exclusions part. So I'll just quickly, we don't do backups. So upselling, typically you wouldn't do backups and things like that on a desktop. You'd use folder redirections, etc. We don't provide antivirus. We don't provide RMM. Okay, so with DaaS version 8, you do have the help desk console, which will show some performance metrics around the PC over IP, the actual desktop's performance. It is in beta though, right? So we don't sort of recommend that it is used entirely in production, but it is a good tool. We recommend that our partners still run their own RMM tools. Okay, so that's, and there's a lot of them out there, and every partner that I talk to seems to use a different one. But yes, so when we talk about desktop models, which is the next slide, we have a standard approach, right? So task workers start off at, say, the standard, and then, most people go for our advanced desktop. I myself run the advanced desktop, Windows 10. I've got 3 24-inch monitors, and I'd say I'm a power user. You can obviously, and you can have different groups of users in different desktop models. So you can have, the users that are only using 1 or 2 applications in a pool of desktops that are just standard. You can then have, users that are power users in advanced or extreme. We do have custom models as well. So for the upsell approach, if they do need extra resources or they do have bespoke requirements, we can tailor that to suit their needs. Now, speaking of custom, we by default include 30 gig of SSD storage. In 90% of cases, that's enough. As I said before, we recommend folder redirection, things like that, so that you don't have to purchase more. You can if you need to. Our recommendation is that you do some things like hide the C drive and all those fun things that you would normally do in a BDI environment, and so that you don't have to purchase more. Is that sort of the desktop models? Yep. Cool. Okay.
Yeah, all good.
Cool. Okay. So as I said, these desktop models can be either persistent or non-persistent. So you can, when you spin them up, you can basically define them like you would if you're familiar with View, if it's a persistent or non-persistent pool, and you basically map them to either a user or a security group within Active Directory. Our pricing for the desktop models are based on month to month, right? So I said before, we don't do hourly billing. It is month to month. We do contract discounts for contract periods. And if you're bringing your own Microsoft licensing, the cost comes down. So I'm not going to talk about price today, but feel free to reach out to myself, or Nick can pass on my details after this as well. And I can sort of talk more on a one-on-one basis. So the provisioning process for a new DaaS environment, I thought this was sort of just good to cover so people understand it. If you're new to VDI, it can be really complicated, especially if you're doing a View environment and things like that. There's a lot of moving parts. We've got our DaaS approach down, so it is quite cookie cutter for a new environment, right? We really do encourage partners to think of it like a traditional desktop environment. the approach that you would have is very similar. So the main thing that we need from your side is Active Directory and network services configured, and we need that available via network, right? So whether that's running on our infrastructure, whether that's running somewhere else, we need that available. We need a couple of user accounts to join the DaaS environment to that domain. We then typically do some initial internal testing, and we hand over to the partner with training. To spin up a new DaaS environment, we typically have a 72-hour business turnaround time. So once we expect it, once you give us the green light, it takes 72 hours to stand up that environment. Once you've got the environment stood up, provisioning new desktops is based on quota, right? So you purchase, say, 50 standard desktops and 20 extreme desktops. You can spin up to that quota at any one time, right? And you get billed based on quota, regardless of whether you're using it, to be back-to-back with VMware's licensing. If you want to purchase additional quota, you can do that via our partner portal. So you basically just request quota, and it increases your quota, and away you go. So once we've handed it over to you, we'll run through the training, and we normally do that the first few environments that you do, because to get your head around it, that's where we're going to cover the interface, the basics of the administration, the group policy components of it. But the great thing about Horizon DaaS, especially through hosted network, is that your typical desktop support skills and your Windows service skills are completely transferable. You don't need any VDI specific skill sets, apart from being able to do general network troubleshooting of looking at, trace routes and latency and things like that. If you can do those fundamental components, then you can troubleshoot 99% of performance issues. If your level 1, level 2 guys can troubleshoot a local performance issue, they can pretty much troubleshoot a DaaS performance issue. And then they've got us as an escalation point, which you don't have to pay for. We include that in the cost. So once the VDI environment has been handed over to you, then it's really just up to you to create all your pools, spin up all the desktops, and then configure the profiles within those desktops as you normally would with any traditional desktop environment. So making sure all of the desktops are cloned out like view from a master template, or a goal pattern. So you need to load up your applications in there. Making sure that when you deploy the individual desktops, that they spin up correctly. And then from there you can hand it over to the client. It is quite a straightforward process. The big catch there is it depends on the number of users. Right, the bulk of the work is done from creating users, getting those profiles set up. There isn't a lot of work that really goes into actually creating the environment.
Is that something that can possibly be automated for many users?
For which part?
So creating users and...
Yeah, so we've got, anyone with a bit of PowerShell knowledge can really automate a lot of this. So we've got a whole bunch.
Or with the partner do
we
that?
don't, because we don't provide support from the operating system above. Yeah. We will provide guidance. So we've got a whole bunch of different scripts for automating, like Office installs, things like that. Even setting up Outlook profiles for Office 365, all that sort of stuff. So we've got a whole bunch of stuff that we can provide, but typically our support stops at that. So if you call us up and say, hey, I've got an error with Microsoft Outlook, we're going to go, sorry guys, if you've got a performance issue or you've got a network issue with your DaaS, great. But, we hand that. And any skill sets that the partner has around normal desktop migration are completely transferable. If you've done an Office 365 migration before, there's no difference. So
on the topic of migrations, it's extremely common for enterprises and SMBs to have on-premises virtual desktops. Let's say based on Horizon 7, for example. How would you go about moving a on-prem virtual desktop environment into your hosted Horizon DaaS environment?
Okay, so first of all, we need to determine if it's a complete move. So if we're going full cloud or if we're going a hybrid approach. So being the more technical one, we'll start to hybrid. So let's say we're going to have some power users are going to remain on site for whatever reason. And what we typically do is we'd have an Active Directory in the cloud so that we've always got in a replicated state. So that way we've always got authentication services. The migration path, we can take the SOE that you use in Horizon View, we can take those and import them into Horizon DaaS. We do need to make some minor modifications to the SOE image. So the Horizon DaaS platform still uses the Horizon View agent. So if you're using Horizon 7, that is still supported. It, however, does need the Horizon DaaS agent. Right. So in the architecture for Horizon DaaS, there's two VMs that provide the web interface and integrate with Active Directory and provide the authentication for those VDI. So we need to install that agent, and then basically it's really just creating the users. So the migration path is quite straightforward. If you've got Horizon View on premise, you can take those GPOs and you can basically export them, or just point them to the new security group that your Horizon DaaS desktops are being deployed into.
Cool. Bo, do you have any questions? Any questions on the line for Ben? I know it's a lot of information to take in.
Yes, a bit.
Yeah. So on the onboarding piece, from the partner's perspective, is there sort of an assistance when there is a requirement to do some design of how it all hangs together?
Oh, of course. So we do that and that's we do that in most situations.
Yeah.
So the overall architecture of a DaaS, we're going to, when an opportunity is brought to us, we're going to then we're going to ask all the qualifying questions. Okay, we need to make sure the links are there, that we've got the right latency, that we've got potential, that the partner is aware of potential downfalls. Is there failover for that internet connection? So looking at things like SD-WAN to make sure that we've got resilient paths, latency sensitivity, things like that. Luckily, Horizon View, particularly with Blast, is really good with latency, so it's less of an issue even over commodity, links. But yeah, we work with that architecture piece of it. So understanding what services the customer currently has, understanding what services the partner has. So if they've got their own infrastructure stack, if they've got their own network services, things like that, and tying it all together. At the end of the day, every partner and every end customer is typically always different. So we do need to account for that. So that's where we'll ask a series of questions to the partner. Sometimes the partner will know that, other times they'll have to get it from the customer, and then we'll provide a bill of materials based off that. And then, if the partner needs it, we can then work with them to develop a migration plan of how they're actually going to transition that over, what the project plan is going to look like, and who's going to be responsible for what.
Was that your last slide?
Well, the last slide is just that.
Oh, there we go.
We have a free trial on our website if you want to test the Horizon DaaS 8. These desktops are locked down, but if you want to try a local admin desktop, just let us know. We can give you local admin on them so that you can have a bit more of a solid play. We also do have proof of concepts available. So if you're interested in being a hosted network partner and deploying Horizon DaaS, we can stand up a DaaS platform, show you how it connects into Active Directory, and run through the entire process as a proof of concept.
So the 14-day trial, is that just a standard desktop? Is it
so it's a advanced desktop.
Okay.
Yeah. So the 4 gig of RAM, 2 vCPU, but we can tailor them for the individual. So if people need GPU for trial, if they want to, which is really helpful because not a lot of partners when they're doing demos to clients. So they can spin up one on the website. They can install their applications and they can present it to the customer. So they can show that it's actually going to work beforehand. And that at least, from the sales cycle allows them to get an understanding if there is an interest from the customer, and then we can move to, further along the line, we can do a full proof of concept to that customer where we do things like customized wallpapers, named users, installing some applications specific for that user and so on.